Welcome back to the Step Through, a weekly show about the WNBA, hosted by myself, Sabreena Merchant, alongside Evin Gualberto. This is our 6th episode of the season, and it is the first one where I have been disappointed that the WNBA is not broadcast on TNT because, oh boy, wouldn't you have loved an Inside the WNBA show discussing the events of this past week, Evin?
It's been messy. I think all the chaos, that I keep talking about. I would love to see somebody react to that on air.
Yeah. I just want like a Candace Parker, Charles Barkley, just back and forth about all of the drama that happened this week in the WNBA. And I know, our lane is generally more like what actually happens on the court. But when a player is making a TikTok about the minutes that she received on the court, I think it's relevant to our interests.
Especially when it's about a team that we have discussed at length over. It's been 2 seasons now. It's relevant, I'd say.
It's relevant. Yeah. So in case, you're not as online as Evin and I, or, a great deal of the WNBA community, Izzy Harrison has been displeased with her minutes distribution as part of the Dallas front court rotation. She played 9 minutes against the Los Angeles Sparks last Friday, a game that Dallas lost. When someone on Twitter asked her why Izzy kept, or not, I don't even think they asked Izzy directly. They just asked in general why Vicki Johnson kept pulling Izzy in and out. Izzy responded with something to the effect of like, if you know, tell me. Like, I don't know. But it was, an appropriate amount of spice directed at Vicki Johnson, who we've also given some grief in terms of how she's laid out her front court rotations. But the best part about this is that it wasn't just the tweet. Then she also made a TikTok about plays only being run for guards. I mean, all Dallas does is run horns, right? Just over and over again. And frankly, bigs get options out of those sets. So I'm not entirely sure what Izzy's talking about. But to add that to the tweet, and then in Dallas's next game against Connecticut, Isabel Harrison gets 13 minutes, which upgrade, sure, but potentially the correct decision by Vicki Johnson because Tara McCowan was awesome and Dallas ended up beating Connecticut to snap out of this unfortunate skid that they've been on. So, Evin, I guess my question to you is Team Izzy or Team Vicki?
I don't know. I don't know how I'd react if a player is making TikToks about my choices as a coach. But Izzy, I get it. I don't. It's the coaches pact thing of like you can't talk bad about other coaches. Although I think if you want to know my feelings about Dallas and the way things work there, watch previous episodes. Pick anyone. We'll talk about them at some point. Mm-hmm. It's consistent. How about you?
It is consistent. It's really too bad that it's so hard to make in-season trades in the WNBA because I would enjoy, watching Isabel Harrison on a different team. I think she's got a lot of talent that is unfortunately somewhat duplicative on the Dallas Wings roster, especially with Satu back. So, it's kind of a shame that like on the one hand, I think it's unreasonable to be playing Izzy Harrison 9 minutes. On the other hand, like you got to get minutes for McCowan and Satu, and evidently a walk. Like that's a thing that needs to happen, I suppose. But I'd probably go like 3 big rotation with Izzy, Satu, and Tiara, and then like sprinkle in a little a walk. But I realize like Kayla Thornton is an institution in Dallas. Vicki Johnson is not going away from her. There's just too many players there. It is the poster child for WNBA expansion. I feel like I've made this comment so many times. But I'm glad that she has gone public with her frustrations because it is infinitely more entertaining for the rest of us.
It is. Anybody else?
Drama?
Yeah.
So bombshell this morning from Howard Megdal of the Next reporting that Phoenix is shopping their all-star. And no, not Diana Taurasi. They're shopping Skylar Diggins-Smith to multiple teams. Howard points out that Skylar has, requested her way out of one market, Dallas, incidentally, apparently worn out her welcome in a second market. And there is, some baggage attached to her. Clearly, the players have expressed their feelings about Skylar Diggins-Smith, who ranked 14th in the player vote for all-star guards, which I will keep feeding that until something changes, because that is weird. That is super, super weird. Phoenix is obviously pretty bad. Not a great basketball team. There are tons of mitigating factors that relate to Phoenix's performance on the basketball court. But Skylar Diggins-Smith tweeting a clown emoji at her head coach, leaving the tweet up. As far as I can tell, Izzy Harrison's tweet is no longer up. But leaving her tweet up and then liking tweets that referred to Vanessa Nygaard as a clown is another level from what Izzy Harrison did. I got to tell you, it's an extra level.
Just off the top of my head, straight swap, impossible. Yes, I assume.
Impossible.
Okay, just send Skylar back to Dallas. Just high comedy.
Can you imagine Skylar Diggins-Smith playing behind Veronica Burton and Ty Harris?
She'd be great in horns, I think.
The beauty of Skylar's contract is you can kind of chop it up into two player veteran size player contracts and just send a pick to get Skylar. But I mean, we were talking about this ahead of time. Connecticut seems like they could be in real use of a Skylar Diggins-Smith, a player who is really strong defensively on the perimeter and also spaces the floor. I don't know how you get Skylar Diggins-Smith. I mean, they have a couple players on maximum contracts that they could send Phoenix's way. That's obviously a very interesting potential piece of business.
First team All-W last season. So, I feel like better than 14. Yeah.
I'd like to see Skylar Diggins-Smith on another good team, which unfortunately Phoenix is not at the moment. And I do think it would behoove Phoenix to get some just any sort of draft capital back, considering their first round pick this year, which is going to be a lottery pick at the moment, is going to the Chicago Sky. And they haven't used a first round pick since Breanna Turner. So it's been a minute. They could use some young players. I think there's something to be had there, on a team that has a little extra draft capital,
Yeah. I mean, we'll see.
It's not going to happen. Let me make this clear. No. A mid-season trade with actual impact players is not going to happen.
Yeah.
That is not the WNBA's MO. Yeah.
But it's fun to speculate.
It is fun to speculate. Any other potential landing spots, Evin? Or
if things were to get interesting, Skylar was born in South Bend, home of Notre Dame, and that is in Indiana.
Why would the Fever trade for Skylar Diggins-Smith?
I don't know. That was just to raise the hairs on the back of Kurtis's neck up.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Hi, Kurtis.
But anyway, that has been this week's step through segment, and we know drama, right?
That's what sparked joy.
I will say lots of things have been sparking joy for me this past week, because the Sparks have kind of figured out how to use Liz Cambage and Nneka Ogwumike together. And although it hurts when I keep picking up Olivia Nelson-Ododa off the waiver wire, that's my fault as a fantasy basketball GM. That's an entirely different thing. But Liz Cambage's passing has kind of been quietly awesome recently. They've been just getting a lot more movement off of her post-ups, and she's doing a better job of facilitating, and it makes the offense just flow, especially when the Sparks are down every single guard in their rotation other than Jordan Canada and Lexi Brown, and they need somebody else to facilitate. Nneka is just freaking awesome. I think the MVP ballot is maybe a little out of reach because of the Sparks record. I could still see Nneka as a top 5 finisher among MVP, but I do think first team All-WNBA is a potential consideration. If you put Asia Wilson at center, Stewie and Nneka at the forwards, I think that is a defensible position. I'd still probably put Candace Parker ahead of her, but there are conversations to be had here about Nneka's position, in that All-WNBA discussion. She's just so good. Her footwork is incredible. Her motor is ridiculous. Her finishing is awesome. Simone Augustus has apparently brought a jump shot to Nneka's arsenal, which was not a thing that she was doing before. She's got the dribble drive working. It is so gratifying to watch Nneka Ogwumike on a decent basketball team again, because last year sucked terribly. I like watching Nneka Ogwumike play. I'm glad that Fred Williams is around to properly utilize his players, something that Did not happen under the previous regime.
And how do you think your team is going to fare against Campesia this time around? Because last time she only had played like 10, 15 minutes in the last game against you guys.
And then the coach lost his job. So.
Well, that sparked joy. Like that a lot. Yeah, I got nothing. Nneka's awesome. The WNBA loves their positional flexibility, obviously. So okay.
Yeah.
Unless you have anything else, do you want to talk a little bit about All-Star? Because Nneka was traded, I believe.
Nneka was traded on All-Star. Yeah. So the official position of the step through, obviously, is that we are rooting for Team Stewart in the All-Star game because, they have all 4 Notre Dame players on Team Stewart. They also have Nneka Ogwumike after Stewie executed a trade of Sabreena Ionescu for Nneka. I was a little concerned when Stewie made that first trade because I'm looking at her roster and there's one point guard. It's Skylar Diggins-Smith, and we know how the players feel about Skylar Diggins-Smith. And she decides to trade Sabreena, who's the only other ball handler, for Nneka, but then makes the subsequent trade of Sylvia Fowles for Sue Bird, which at least gives her some point guard play. I do think that Team Wilson has the better playmakers because they've got Sloot and Sabreena. But again, we are bound by the rules of this podcast and we'll be rooting for Team Stewart accordingly.
Doesn't Team Stewart also have Alyssa Thomas, famously Connecticut's point guard?
I do believe they have Alyssa Thomas. That was the first pick that sort of made Asia go, oh, during the draft. Yeah. Maybe I've made a mistake. Yeah.
For those who didn't see it, when Jackie was picked, Notre Dame superstar Jackie Young, I believe she is the only Las Vegas player not on
Team Wilson?
Asia Wilson and Becky Hammond's team. How'd that go?
She's Puma Gang.
That's right.
That's why Stewie took her. She took care of all of her Puma players, which I guess is just Jackie Young and Skylar Diggins-Smith. But, hey. The Las Vegas Aces tweeted out a photo of Asia Wilson once Jackie Young was selected, and she realized that she neglected to take Jackie Young, and that was very good camera work by them. Another thing interesting about the Las Vegas Aces photography work during the draft was that if you watch the television presentation, you saw Asia Wilson with a pen and nothing to write on, which I thought was so funny. But then the Aces Twitter account revealed that there was some paper underneath that was just not making its way onto the camera. It doesn't appear that Asia actually wrote on said paper, but at least there was a little bit more, thought process going into the draft setup.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I love the idea of you just have it in case you need it.
It was so funny to me that Asia was like, I got a pen, but it's all up here. And Stewie's saying things like, I don't know how James is going to handle these rotations, and thinking about
Yeah.
It was very funny to me.
Yeah. And so it shakes out that Stewie's team has all the Storm players.
Correct.
And then she has managed to take Jonquel and Alyssa Thomas. Bree Jones is on the other team.
Correct.
And then she
I
managed.
think the Sky players are split as well.
Yes.
Yeah, Kalia Copper and Emma Miesemann ended up on Team Stewart. Stewie had an agonizing decision to make between Miesemann and her former teammate, Natasha Howard. She went with Mies. I think part of that decision-making was she wanted spacing and she wanted to take another Chicago player. I do agree with taking Kalia Copper that early because even though I don't think she should have been an all-star, you can't deny Kalia Copper's fit in an all-star game. It is outstanding. And just have her running fast breaks in Chicago. You want that on your team. But I do think Sloot is the best point guard in the league, and having her and Candace playmaking on Asia Wilson's team is going to be interesting, provided any of them actually take this game seriously, which I don't know if they will.
Yeah. If you recall Candace Parker's advice to Satu Sabali last All-Star when she was mic'd up, when one of them was mic'd up, I can't remember which, is
just run and you'll get 5 easy little layups in this game. Well, I guess this ain't a normal. No, seriously.
Kalia Copper.
She runs. We've got Kalia Copper and Skylar on the same team. I was hoping they'd also have Dearica on that team, but Stewie decided to go with her own teammate instead of De'Arica Hamby with that first reserve pick, which I get, but like I don't think Asia Wilson was going to be taking Jewel Lloyd. Like you could have done a little managing here. Yeah. That was a missed opportunity.
Yep. One thing, I think I texted you this. The players I want to see on the court at the same time are Skylar, and then I think all the other lefties are on Team Wilson. So Asia,
Yeah.
Kelsey, and Ariel Atkins. I would love that.
I just hope that, like, again, they play hard because last year's format had very much like competitiveness built into it. All of the players that were snubbed from the Olympic team who wanted to show out, and like the players on the Olympic team who wanted to prepare for the Olympics. But I'm not sure that we're going to get that same level of enthusiasm in this year's game. I think it might be a little bit of a letdown. So I'm just mentally preparing for the fact that, like, oh, I love all of the combinations we can work out here, but maybe James Wade's just going to go 5 starters, 5 reserves, and like have a good time there.
Yeah, the only thing that I am disappointed by is that Arike and Skylar ended up on the same team, because had they been on different teams, a level of competitiveness would have ran through the entire game, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you have players on teams that are like not necessarily contending for a title, like they take these big stages very seriously because it's their opportunity to show that, like, yeah, maybe my team sucks, but I'm still pretty good.
Sure. Do you want to name names or?
I was literally talking about Skylar.
Anyway, are there
You got a prediction, Evin?
No. I would like to say. Oh, here's my question. So, assuming for whatever reason James Wade decides to put all 4 Notre Dame players out at the same time, who is that 5th player?
Okay, so it's Skylar, Jewel, Arike, and Jackie. So Jackie's like the 4, I guess. So we're gonna need a big. It's either Jonquel or Stewie.
Right. But what if they put Nneka out there? Are you gonna be okay?
We're just gonna clip it and analyze that film for the next episode of the Step Through.
Okay. Just making sure.
That's tantalizing. All right, moving on. We just talked about like 20 minutes worth of stuff that I didn't even have on the outline. Like,
No.
the one thing I did want to ask you about, Evin, is we're at like the nominal midpoint of the season. Everybody's played at least 18 games, so they're all past the halfway point. But we did this exercise last year, just like putting the WNBA into tiers, and we almost got the champion into the top tier. I think we almost did. But I wanted to do that again right now because, like, we came into this season thinking Aces, Sun were among the best teams like they were last year, and much of the year played out that way, but there has been some shakeup since. And so I'm curious, like, if you had to divide the WNBA into tiers right now, the 12 teams, assuming you're not using 12 tiers, which is probably unnecessary anyway, how would you go about that? Like, where are the fault lines in this year's WNBA standings?
Woof. Okay.
You don't even have to go by the standings, honestly.
No. Yeah. But I mean,
like, if you wanted to put the Lynx in the top tier, I'm okay with that.
Well, I mean, I would say the Fever and the Mercury would be just
in the bottom tier. Yes.
Yeah, the bottom tier. Minnesota would be in a tier above, just because. I mean, am I going to count out Cheryl Reeve? No, that would be insane. No. That would be. They're on a run right now, so who knows how long that could go for. And then you have, in my mind, I wanted to eliminate the Sparks already, put them in that bottom tier, but I mean, you do
record the show with me, so
yeah, so that's a +5, +0.5 bump right there. I don't necessarily know how it would shake out, but I would say that I believe there are 5 at the top. Maybe no, I would say there are 5 at the top. So it's dealer's choice how you want to rank it. But if we're just throwing them in tiers, I would say the Sky, the Aces, obviously, the Storm, the Mystics, and then like if you wanted to make an in-between tier, the Sun, because like I don't know. We keep talking about the Sun.
Math is not working for the Sun. I feel it.
Yeah. But I mean, we're going to talk quite a bit about the Atlanta Dream for our game of the week, so we can get into that. But the Mystics, who like Elena Delle Donne on load management, if you told me that she would only be playing like X amount of games, I might have told you that the Mystics would be struggling in those games, especially against the contenders, the elite of the elite. But I don't think they are. And they've looked very impressive against the teams, even in losses. So I don't know. The Mystics are such a wild card because like you think one thing and then So I really don't know.
Yeah, I came into today thinking I have Chicago in a tier by themselves, and then I have the other four, Connecticut, Vegas, Seattle, and Washington in a tier behind them. And then Chicago proceeded to lose to Minnesota, so I had to reevaluate some things. But I do believe that Chicago is just kind of a cut above the rest of the league. So I would still put them like as a top team. If I were, forced to add additional teams to that top tier, I think I'd put the Mystics and Aces with them and then the Storm and Sun below, just because projecting ahead, I assume Elena's going to be playing in playoff games. And when the Mystics play with Elena Delle Donne, like they're as good as anybody else in the league, right? I don't take a lot away from Connecticut coming back down 17 against the Mystics when Elena's not playing. I don't take a lot away from the fact that they lost to the Liberty once without, Elena in the lineup. But none of those things, they lost to the Sparks without Elena in the lineup. None of those things really matter to me because, down the stretch, I assume that in the important games, Delle Donne's going to be there. So that's, I think I'd put like that. I don't know. I think Chicago's by themselves, then the next four. Then there's like these 6 teams that are fighting for the last 3 playoff spots. And, Phoenix is in there. I don't think they're going to get there. But like when you have players with like the quality of Skylar Diggins-Smith and Diana Taurasi, and apparently Kia Nurse is coming back after the All-Star break, which is very cool. But I still think you're right to put them in the Indiana tier instead of the other ones. So then we have like 5 teams sort of in the middle there, Atlanta, Minnesota, New York, Dallas, and LA. I don't really see that much distinction between those 5, honestly. I could be tempted to put Atlanta and Dallas by themselves now that Atlanta has Tiffany Hayes back and they look like, oh, they can score again. So yeah, I think I'd go like Chicago 1, then those 4 teams, then Atlanta, Dallas, then like New York, LA, Minnesota, and then Indiana, Phoenix.
The only thing I would say,
maybe I should bump up Minnesota to the Dallas Atlanta tier, actually.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to say that if Minnesota's roster goes on as presently constructed, I could see it, but I mean, I wouldn't bet on them to be that team that punches up.
Nafisa Collier says she wants to play with Sylvia Fowles.
I know,
so
but until she comes back, we know.
I know.
Yeah. I would say that if I had to pick one of those teams to punch up, I would go with the Liberty just because of what they've looked like recently. I mean, it's up to the viewer to decide whether they were just beating up on bad teams or, they caught teams at the right time, but they're starting to play well together and they are missing an all-star from last year.
Right.
And I mean, all of the pieces we talked about in the last episode. So I think the Liberty are, if I had to pick one, I'd go with them.
Got it. Yeah. It's interesting. I made those tiers and like I would still probably pick the Sparks to make the playoffs if the season were to end, like when the season ends, and I didn't put them in my top 8. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Minnesota like is playing very well, but they have a lot of losses still that you have to got to come back from. Like we're talking about the 11th place team in the standings right now, even though they just beat the Sky and the Aces. The Aces by 31 points. Let's not forget. An insane margin of victory against a team that could win a title this year. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting that like I had this idea in my head that they were like the 5 contender teams, right? And then the other 7 teams. And then somehow this week there were 4 games between those contenders and the others where the others won, right? Like we had the Liberty beat the Sun. I think that was last week maybe. Then we had Dallas beat the Sun. We had Atlanta beat Seattle. We had Vegas beat Vegas lose to Minnesota, and the Sky lose to Minnesota. So I mean, does it even make sense to think of tiers? Like I still think that like if the champion comes out of not those 5, like it's gonna be surprising, but those teams are just not like unbeatable to me either.
Well, for what it's worth, we made tiers last year.
I know.
For those of you that don't know, I think it was the Aces, the Sun, and the Storm in the rock, paper, scissors.
Yes.
Right. And which one team always beats the other. And then we had.
We got hurt.
Yes, that's true. That is true. But the two teams in the WNBA finals ended up coming out of our next tier.
Correct.
I think it was high ceiling. What was it? It was something where we said, do you remember?
Yeah. We had talked about those three teams, Minnesota, Phoenix, and Chicago, as being in the next tier. Neither of us really had a lot of faith in Minnesota. But it was like, which of these teams do you think has a chance to like be as good as the teams in the next year? And you said Chicago, and I want to say I said Phoenix.
Yes.
But it was that idea.
Yeah, and then we said that Minnesota had a higher floor, but a much lower ceiling.
Much lower ceiling, which
right.
I feel validated in that description. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of, do you wanna talk a little bit about the Minnesota Chicago game?
Yeah, let's. So I was actually getting a haircut while I was watching this game on League Pass earlier today. But it's a good time to just like look down on your phone like while things are happening, and these two teams just run better stuff than most of the teams in the league. Like the amount of player movement that's happening on Minnesota right now is so fun to watch. Just the number of times that, like, first of all, Shep doing this high post facilitating is a delight. It's so much fun. And I'm happy that we called this way back in the early days of the step through when she was doing that high-low action with Natalie Achanwa, and I was like, this is kind of interesting. Apparently, high post facilitating is still a thing with Jessica Shepard, and there's just a lot of willing movement happening around her, whether that's Powers or Banham or Jefferson even. Like, there's a lot to have to focus on for the defense, and Chicago was just not always up to the task today, which is saying something because Chicago is generally up to the task when it comes to like defending other teams. Even when Candace was on the court, like there were just enough actions to cause her a little bit of difficulty, which is hard because I think she's arguably the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year this year.
Yeah, I mean, the Sky, it was their second camp game, I believe, right?
At least their second.
At least, yes. So, I mean, all the older players on the Sky got a good night's rest. But yeah, when you're talking about the Lynx, it's Cheryl Reeve. It's a staple of her. I don't want to even call it a system. There's a level of relentlessness to it. I mean, that stems from Sylvia Fowles and Kayla McBride and Ariel Powers. They're just like, they just go all the time. And I mean, there are 3 Notre Dame players, so, that's always great. There's so much. Their front court it's a bunch of, I don't necessarily know if they're big up front, especially, at the time of this recording. Do you know Milic's situation?
I think she's on another 7-day, but she's not really playing.
Okay. Yeah,
because they've got 4 other bigs who are in front of her. Yeah.
Because I mean, if you think about like, I don't really know about Jess Shepard's like ability to threaten the further away from the basket that she gets with her scoring, but her passing, certainly outstanding. And then, when you think of all the other forwards, either they can hit enough, talking about Demir Stantis, or they'll make you pay with their movement. And there's just something about it that it just keeps on coming. And it's so funny considering that that's how I think the Sky sometimes is. Like they'll hit you with waves and waves and waves.
Yeah, it's really just fun basketball to watch. Like you and I were joking that we had prepped, Storm Dream as our game of the week, but like, what if this one ended up being a banger? And lo and behold, just a lot of good stuff happening out of this game. I remain unconvinced that Chicago has a backup point guard. I'm not sold on Dana Evans or Julia Almont, but that is just a take that I will have to take to my grave because they seem perfectly happy with their point guard situation.
Well, you can have Candace really run point then.
Yeah, but they seem to keep Sloot and Candace together a lot, don't they? I mean,
they're so much more dangerous when they play together.
I know, right? Yeah.
It's a weird lack of staggering. It's what it is.
Right. But like I understand it sometimes when like the combination is so potent that like you want to keep them together as much as possible. And their bench lineups are fine. Like you've got Emma Meesman there. They get Azure. You've got Copper, who's just wrecking shit all the time. Like she got out in transition so much in this game, and like her finishing wasn't as on point as it usually is. Like some missed layups, which you have to credit Minnesota for actually running the floor with her and like providing some pressure at least on those fast break opportunities. But like there's enough going on that like you obviously miss having Sloot and Candace on the court, but like I understand what the offensive theory of those lineups is, at least, you know, when they're benched together.
I agree.
Yeah, just an obligatory mention of Candace Parker doing everything, because her 3-point shot looks really good this year. And if Candace is making threes, because Lord knows she likes taking them, there are very few ways to effectively guard her. I talked about this on my Swish Appeal podcast with Annie Gospel last week. The idea of Candace Parker retiring when she is this good is insane. Like at least Sylvia Fowles is on a freaking minute restriction at this point. Candace Parker appears to be at the peak of her powers. I mean, like she just can score from anywhere. She's hitting these ridiculous baseline fadeaways right now. It's become like a once a game thing. I don't know how she does it, and like it looks terrible every time the shot goes up, but it's just swish. Like I don't know how it's happening. That 3 that she hit to get the game within 1, you know, when Chicago was down 4 within the last 20 seconds, another big shot. Defensively, like her activity is just insane. When she gets the stop and then throws a pinpoint pass to a leaking out Kahleah Copper is maybe my favorite thing in basketball right now. So yeah, just a lot of Candace Parker appreciation, even though I know her team did not win the game. God, like, the first year I covered the Sparks was 2019, and Candace had just come back from an injury and was like very off the whole season, did not make an all-star game, you know, obviously had the very famous benching against Connecticut in game 3 of the WNBA semifinals. And I was very worried that this was what Candace Parker was becoming. Her last 3 years have just been like so freaking good. So very good. And like, could she repeat? I mean, that, who knows? Yeah.
A link below to the podcast. Yeah, I think there was a graphic during the Lynx game that said something like first
player to 6,000 points, 3,000 rebounds, and 1,500 assists.
That's the one. Amazing.
It stands out, doesn't it?
Just so good.
We should talk about Minnesota a little bit. Your girl Aerial Powers getting things done.
Oh my God. Used this term before, but relentless. There's there's no back down. She's somebody whose presence you can always feel on the floor. Good or bad, doesn't matter.
No,
she's on the floor, you'll know.
There. Yeah.
Yes. Kayla McBride, just running, just getting cardio in.
Speaking about McBride for a second, though, like I feel like there was this narrative that she was underutilized on the Aces, and I just think the fact that she is always occupying a defender, like legitimately always occupying at least one defender, is so important, because there are people that you can help off of, and Kayla McBride is not one of those, because the minute you look away, she's doing something else. And like you said, maybe it doesn't always show up on the box score, but her impact is so important to any team, especially when like you don't have a ton of shooters on the court. Like Kayla McBride, always treated as such.
Never ending gravity. Never ending. Yeah. That's really, I mean, besides the great sets, of which, you know, it's a James Wade Cheryl Reeve game. There's, you know,
it's so
obviously.
This one wasn't even a set, but like there was about 1:15 left in the game, and I forget who brought the ball down the court for Chicago, but just like an instant like entry into Emma Meesman on the post, and she just immediately hits it to a baseline cutter, and like the ball movement on Chicago is astounding. Like that they know where everybody is at all times. Brilliant stuff.
No, I think it might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I recall correctly, oh man, I was going to talk about this with the Dream. They have this sweet set. It's an old triangle offense, or at least that's where I learned it. Principle blind pig is the term for it. Backdoor step, as some know it. But so it's when like a player's being denied. So a perimeter player typically is being denied. So the big flash is up to catch the ball, and then that player being denied goes backdoor. So it's immediate. I think it was to Allie.
Yeah.
And so Mies is able to like drop the inch perfect pass, I think. And,
inch perfect is the way to describe it. Yes.
Yeah. But like Allie also had a I mean, she missed the very last shot coming off of a great elevator set, but just a great game. She was the one who was able to gather the offensive board and in one motion redirect it to Candace to hit that three to put them within one super late in the game. Just astounding. Like Allie's so good.
She is so good. Yeah. I worry sometimes that James Wade gets a little too enamored with Rebecca Gardner and doesn't play quickly enough, but hey, save her in the regular season. That's fine. She'll be there when the, big stage is there for her.
Yeah, that's if Izzy Harrison played on a team with Allie Quigley, she would not be mad at all, probably, about all the plays being for a guard.
Yeah. It's a really fun team to watch. But I am just keeping an eye on Minnesota at the bottom of the standings because this is a team that looks like they should be a playoff team. The way that they're like you mentioned, just the force Aerial Powers plays with, combined with that constant motion of Kayle McBride. You've got that hub of Sylvia Fowles just defensively too. I mean, down the stretch, then you've got that facilitating from Shep. I mean, just a bunch of competing wing shooters and Banham and I mean, Carlton does not ever score actually, but she's just always there. She just plays good defense sometimes. But yeah, I just like a ton of their pieces. And the one thing I was concerned about heading into the season was that I didn't know that they could sustain without adequate point guard play. And they found Moriah Jefferson. So here we are. I mean, it's just like a redux of last year when they got Lasia Clarendon. It's just that they got Mo a little bit later. And no Nafisa obviously changes a lot of things, but you could easily see a similar upward trajectory just based on the fact that it's very hard to bet against Shell Reeve.
100% agree. Yeah. So unless you have anything else.
This may be the longest we've ever gone without getting to our game of the week.
That's true. Well, we'll speed through it because our game of the week was this past Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I always do this? The dates will never.
It was July 3rd. It was Seattle in Atlanta. We mostly picked this as our game of the week, not because the game itself was particularly entertaining. We try to pick ones that are a little more back and forth, but the addition of Tiffany Hayes to Atlanta makes the dream just worth checking in on, first of all, because they're entirely different when they have Tiffany Hayes at that spot instead of Maya Caldwell or Christy Wallace or whoever was there, earlier in the year. And I mean, we kind of mentioned this in the tier situation, just where Atlanta belongs in the discussion, but Atlanta has put on a show their last two games, right? First we've got the Erica Wheeler game tying 3-pointer against New York, and then Tiffany Hayes laying the smackdown in overtime against the New York Liberty. And then they follow that up with this really, really impressive win against Seattle, where Seattle just looks rushed the entire game on all of their passes. I mean, part of it is sloppiness, to be fair, but it's just, if catches were not made cleanly, Atlanta is just there on you, pouncing, trying to take away possession. They lead the league in steals, and you felt their arms on Seattle all game. I don't know a better way to put it. Now, granted, Seattle is not the offensive juggernaut it was in recent years. All of the fact that they're so good defensively comes at a price, right? The fact that Gabby Williams is in the starting lineup means that you were going to make some offensive concessions, and that's fine. But they are a good enough offense that they shouldn't have been just completely discombobulated the way Atlanta made them. And the fact that the Dream were able to do that is, I think, sort of what interested me in making this game of the week. But I kind of just want to let you talk about Tiffany Hayes a little bit, because Lordy, was she fun against Seattle.
Energy, just never stopping. There was this one clip where she tracked back in transition and she deflected a ball out of, it was a hit-ahead pass. I can't remember. I think it might have been Jewel Lloyd or Breanna January who
there's at least 3 of them, so I don't even know which one you're talking about.
That's fair. But the one that jumps out to me in particular is because they showed it on it was a timeout. It was a cut of the baseline camera person. As she deflects it away, she then looks into the camera and then flexes. And I was just like,
oh,
that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, that's it. There's an infectious level of energy, and this dream squad team, it feels weird to say dream team. This Atlanta team, that
is fair.
Yeah. This Atlanta team takes after their head coach, Tanisha Wright. And you can tell they want to get after you on both ends. From what I can tell, it's a lot of pressure on ball defensively. and a lot of early actions offensively. So they're just, like I was talking about, there's a level of relentlessness, yes, but now there's, I don't necessarily want to say depth, because like on paper, like I have heard some say that, you know, the pieces that this Atlanta team has, like offensively, it would prove to be a little bit of a challenge. But the fact that Coach Wright has made it work on offense and it looks good, and I'll talk a little bit about the sets later, but defensively, like there's no peace. You're talking about Subert and Breanna Stewart not even able to get the ball at about the 3-point line on back-to-back possessions.
Right.
Where they
the second time the camera like didn't even get there fast enough. Like I couldn't figure out how Stewie lost the ball again.
Yeah. But it's just like, I don't see that happen very often. And yeah, it's like you said, sloppiness, yes. But when, you know, they're going out and running the other way, they get a layup off of that. And then it happens a second time. And then I believe the second time the ball ended up all the way in Tiffany Hayes' hands at the Atlanta 3-point line, and then takes it. And she looks like she's sprinting, and all the other Storm players look like they're in slow motion.
Yeah.
Just like it's a Cheyenne Parker post up that Gabby Williams ends up on her, which is fine. I'm okay with that particular matchup, but it didn't look like anybody knew that Cheyenne Parker had the ball in the post for Seattle. It's stuff like that. You know, this is a young, hungry, lively team, and Seattle did not look any of those things.
Yeah. Completely agree. You know, two players really stood out to me in this game, and that was Tiffany Hayes and Cheyenne Parker. Tiffany Hayes, we've already hit on. The trackbacks are just insane, because one of them, like, she is the one who scores at the rim. Like, she just bulldozes Sue Bird, gets to the cup, right, hits a layup, and then immediately comes back and deflects the pass that is going to Jewel Lloyd. Another one, I think she is being trapped by Gabby Williams and Breanna Stewart on the sideline. And, you know, she gets the ball taken away. Gabby attempts to leak it out to Stewie, and she still goes all the way back and knocks it off of Stewie. Like, it's the fact that she's involved in both ends of the plays is crazy to me. And then like that she just provides somewhere to go to, like to get paint pressure, which Seattle has none of. And it was just very obvious in this game that she can get her own shot reliably in the half court, because like Atlanta runs a lot of good stuff to like get Ryan Howard open, you know, but like those are mostly jumpers. Like Tiffany Hayes is actually like a perimeter scorer who gets the meat of her points in the paint. And it's just such a nice compliment when they have Howard. And you have like decent point guard play too. You know, Erica Wheeler runs decent offense, like Aari McDonald, one of my top 2 candidates for sophomore of the year. If that were an award that the WNBA gave out. There was one play, Breanna January is guarding her. And we have talked about how Breanna January like was able to actually kind of guard Kelsey Plum. Aari McDonald gets a first step on her, and like it's that slow motion thing that you were talking about where Aari just zooms to the basket, and Breanna's like, I thought I was the best defensive guard in the league, and this girl is just not even in my eye line anymore. So it's interesting just to watch like all of the just hyper athletic players they have, you know, whether that's super physical or super fast or just like Ryan Howard, who has a combination of everything and like that size and shooting put together. Cheyenne Parker, like she just posted up on Stewie and Izzy like it was not a problem at all. Like, and she's got really nice footwork and some spins. I believe there was a step through in there. I spent a lot of time talking about Candace Parker earlier, and Cheyenne Parker has, you know, some similarities in terms of the name at the very least, but we mentioned this last week. Like, if I had picked an Atlanta Dream player as an all-star, it would not have been Ryan Howard. It would have been Cheyenne Parker, because the offensive load that she has to carry just doing it herself. And then also, like, she is the back line for one of the better defenses in the league. She's just really, really, really good.
Yeah. So Spencer Nussbaum wrote this great piece, link below for the next, talking about how, you know, the Dream have created this elite defense. And in it early on, he talks about how they had the second worst defense in the league, and then their best defender went out the door in Elizabeth Williams. It's a great read. One of the things that I noticed specifically was that they were icing all of the ball screen actions. And so if you're not familiar with what icing a pick and roll, blue, down, whatever terminology you want to use, it's basically, if you think of a side pick and roll, the ball handler defender will angle their body to keep you away from the middle and force you down back the sideline. So it keeps you out of the middle right there. That's the best place for a team to hurt you, is by getting the ball right down the middle, a paint touch, but it takes the opponent out of their offense, right? So most teams have plays that work when a pick and roll isn't iced, but when it is iced, you have a few counters, but there's a limit to the number of counters you can have to an iced pick and roll. And on paper, you would think that a team with Tina Charles, right, who we haven't yet talked about being a member of the Storm because at the time of the previous recording, nothing had happened.
She was divorcing from the Phoenix Mercury.
Yes. So when you think of like Tina Charles and Breanna Stewart, not really the pick and roll bigs you want to ice against, but there are only so many looks you can get out of that. So similar to what I've said with the Aces and then the Liberty against the Sun, making them play your way, Atlanta icing everything really forces you to, these are the looks we're getting. If we make them, we make them. But the Storm did not make them this game, and it looked not great. And they looked harassed and hassled and pressured to the point where I believe this is something I had to check 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
The only Storm player in double digits was Breanna Stewart. Like that doesn't, I think.
Was that like through the competitive portion of the game, or?
I think Stewie hit double digits early, and then the game just.
Was it ever competitive?
Yeah.
We got 9 for Jewel Lloyd, 8 for January Lavender and Gabby Williams.
Shout out to Tina Charles with 2.
But that point about Seattle being harassed, I just want to hit on that real quick. Like, they were so rushed in everything they were trying to do. There was a point at the end of the first quarter where they get an offensive rebound and have the ball with 10 seconds left, and Breanna January just takes a shot because like the defender is coming at her. And it's like, those are the situations where you think a veteran team would know, oh, we should play out the rest of the clock and have the ball for the rest of the quarter. No, she takes the shot early. Atlanta gets going in transition. Christy Wallace gets fouled. That's another 2 points that you're down.
Yeah, and it's what I was talking about is that Atlanta, they're pushing you. They're always pushing you, whether it's pushing the ball in transition or attacking. They're always attacking and controlled everything they wanted to control, right? So they had, I believe, like 42 points in the paint. I don't even think Seattle led in this game.
No, they did not.
Yeah. So that should tell you everything you need to know.
They got to within 4 a couple of times. There was a moment in the third quarter where like Sue Bird has a layup that would have gotten them to 2. She just misses it right at the hoop. This one, I more blame on Sue Bird than the Atlanta defense because like that shot should have gone in. But like Seattle, I hate to do this again, but like they did the thing where they played a 5-person lineup with no Stewie, no Jewel Lloyd, no Sue Bird. We're throwing out Piff, Breanna January, Steph Talbot, Tina Charles, and Jontel Lavender. And like, I kind of get that Epiphany Prince and Tina Charles should be able to handle a bench offense. And Atlanta, to their credit, is also playing a 5-person bench unit. At this point, it was Christy Wallace, Aari McDonald, Adi Durr, Kia Vaughn, and Naz Hillmon. So like, if you're Noelle Quinn, you're thinking, okay, yeah, I can, put out 5 bench players against this. It's just Tina Charles doesn't look like she knows what she's doing with the rest of the team yet, which is fine. Like, second game with the team, whatever. Epiphany Prince and Breanna January are just so sped up by their guards, right? Like Aari McDonald, freaking menace. Adi Durr, God bless them, looks so much happier in Atlanta. And like, actually that athleticism is coming back. Like some really nice defensive plays in this one again too. But I just hate when Seattle does it. I hate when Seattle does that.
Do you think that the Seattle bench would have looked better, or the minutes would have been staggered, or the starters would have been spread out had Noelle Quinn not been wearing Storm Nike gear?
Noelle Quinn just didn't bring it for this game. Like, you want to look at where the energy level just evaporated for the Storm. It was when Noelle Quinn decided not to dress up for this one and just went with Nike issued team attire instead of like the excellent outfits that she usually, dons for these WNBA games. I believe I've mentioned it on this podcast before that I think Noelle Quinn is the best dressed coach in the WNBA. I remain convinced of that fact, but like Tanisha Wright brought it. That was a nice, I think like floralish top that she was wearing. And Noelle was just a little dull, a little uninspired. And yeah, that's how the Storm played. Maybe that's a problem with the Sun this year. Kurt Miller can't wear his shirts anymore.
Wow. The league really took away the Sun power. Oh boy.
Naz Hillmon, I thought that her inability to space the floor offensively would be more problematic. Seattle did not make it so. They just let her exist without like gumming up the offense at all. And that allows Naz to be just a pest defensively. I thought she did a pretty decent job of making things challenging for Stewart. In my opinion, some of these should have been called fouls. Like her hands were all over Breanna Stewart, but she was just right up in her body, like really good post defensively. I think her perimeter defense is even getting better. And I'm not sure that Atlanta is doing anything in particular to like involve her offensively so that her, lack of a jump shot is not a problem. I think Seattle just wasn't taking advantage of it. And part of the reason they weren't taking advantage of it was you're throwing out a lineup with Tiffany Prince, Brianna January, Steph Talbot, Chantel Lavender, and Tina Charles.
A referee can't call every foul.
No.
They just can't.
Can't do it.
So the Dream, I don't necessarily think they're fouling all of the time, but like if to your point, you think that Naz Hillmon was fouling Breanna Stewart on some of those post-ups, the referees will soon have to decide we can call everything or we're only going to call the most blatant ones. And so there has to be a level of ferocity and bite to your offense to get those foul calls on the defense. So, settling for jump shots when it's hard to point to this particular stat and say that this is why, but the Storm went 9 for 32 from
threes,
3. Yeah. And, if you add that to the fact that the Dream only took 18, but they made 7, but it was 42-16 points in the paint. And Cheyenne Parker looked like...
I want to say like Shaquille O'Neal, but I'm trying to think of a female comparison.
So, here's my thing was Tina Charles led the league in scoring last year, right?
That is correct.
Breanna Stewart leads the league in scoring this season. Cheyenne Parker looked like the most dominant scorer, period, full stop. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about what the Dream do exactly, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that you just trust Cheyenne Parker to attack. And she did.
I have one very important question for you, Evin. Where does a healthy Nia Coffey fit into this rotation?
On the back line, just blocking shots.
Whose minutes is she taking?
I don't know, but I think the thing about it would be, okay, if you're an Atlanta fan and you're not quite sold on Nia Coffey because she has, I don't want to say she's underwhelmed early.
The offense has been bad.
Okay. She's underwhelmed early offensively. If you had to sell me on what she could do offensively, what can she do?
She's good in transition, and the three-pointer was working for the Sparks last year. I don't think that's sustainable, though. But like Tanisha Wright has shown a willingness to play players who are not giving you a lot offensively, provided they compete defensively. So to me, you just take out the Kia Vaughn minutes, which how many years am I going to say this? You take out the Kia Vaughn minutes. You give those to Nia Coffey. Maybe you're a little bit small, but I think Naz could theoretically play center defensively. And that's where those minutes come from, because like Billings is just so active and like so good on the offensive glass. You can't take away those forward minutes. Naz is like who you're investing in as your, one of the bigs of the future. Obviously Cheyenne is Cheyenne. So I think the big minutes have to come from Kia Vaughn, because like if you take away Christy Wallace, then all of a sudden the spacing on that second unit just crumbles, right? And Nia's not a guard, so like, and I don't want to take away AD's minutes either, because I think they give something like that pressure defensively. It's just different than what Nia does. So I guess it's the Kia Vaughn minutes, but like everyone loves Kia Vaughn. Like Atlanta traded a draft pick to get Kia Vaughn on an unprotected contract when Phoenix was just going to waive her. Like people love her.
So I was going to say that you're going to have to toggle some, because to me, it wasn't a problem this game. And I don't think it's a problem going forward necessarily. But at some point, one of the bigs might get into foul trouble. And now you can scale Nia Coffey up. So that to me is what it is. But the energy, the defense, like as pretty as the sets are for the Dream, I think if I'm Tanisha Wright, I don't really care about the offense, because
your identity comes
fuels
from the defense,
everything.
and you're just fueling the transition then too. Yeah.
Right. So unless you have anything else, like to just quickly talk about a little bit of what the Dream do offensively, and then I'll throw in one set for the Storm, just because, hey, why not? What fun. So the very first thing I would like to point out is that, like I said, Cheyenne Parker, right? So for this, Erica Wheeler swings the ball to Tiffany Hayes and then fills to the corner. Hayes enters the ball to Cheyenne in the post and then basket cuts. So this is called a Laker cut, made famous by the Showtime Lakers, entering the ball into Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The reason Hayes does it is so Gabby Williams, who's right there, can't dig from the perimeter. Hayes is eventually going to finish the cut to the weak side corner. And then if you'll notice here, very, very slight, but Billings is setting a flare screen for Ryan. Ryan sells this by taking one step to the right, which engages Jewel, and then she's able to spring open for a jumper. That's the biggest thing I've noticed is Ryan Howard is lethal off the ball. Like as a mover, I don't even necessarily know if these are sets all the time, but there's just a flow to all of this. So, and obviously it takes advantage of Cheyenne Parker. So for this one, you don't have to know what the corner offense is, but Billings and Hayes are on the weak side here. They're going to engage the defenders. So Wheeler to Cheyenne at the elbow and then cuts through. The stumble, I think may have been a give back. Who's to say? But it's going to look like Ryan is lifting for the handoff at the elbow as Wheeler relocates to the corner, but reads the defense here. Jewel Lloyd is caught a little bit out of position, and then Ryan is able to just cut straight to the basket. Tough finish. I mean, Breanna Stewart is rotating over, so it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. And then here are two plays that, as I said earlier, blind pig is when the forward steps up and it looks like the perimeter player is being denied. So here it's floppy, which if you don't know what floppy is, modern floppy is two players at the baseline and then they come out for two like pin downs. Here Billings will flash, and right as Billings catches it, blind pig action where Ryan cuts back door. Again, Ryan cutting back door, great poise to pump fake because Ezzy's rotating over. Ezzy's blocked a lot of shots this year, get her up in the air, disengage her. And then a progression of that is here's another floppy set where it's Cheyenne Parker coming out and it's AD going back door. When it's not there, AD gets a double stagger on the weak side and Cheyenne and Wheeler play a two-person game. The jumper does not go in, but credit to Cheyenne Parker, level of relentlessness, right? Offensive rebound. That to me was like the difference in the game, right? The energy. And then, as I said, as I promised, Seattle, this didn't necessarily look the best, but it's a great way to illustrate ice defense. Aari McDonald is icing Piff here. You can tell by the way she angles her body so that she can't really use the Breanna Stewart screen. Seattle just keeps flowing, and it looks like Tina Charles improvs this by setting a flare screen for Stewie. But yeah, Stewie hits this, but it's just a testament to how out of sorts Seattle looked. So I just wanted to highlight that. But yeah,
even in a game where Seattle looks completely out of sorts, the fact that Stewie can still end with the stat line that she did, 19 points, like the no assists are really what gets me. Like that's how you know that it wasn't working for Seattle, because like Stewie's not the playmaker for Seattle by any means, but the defensive pressure on her should lead to other opportunities, and that just wasn't happening. I think she had like a stretch of 6 straight free throws, like while Seattle was on a 9-0 run, because they just couldn't do anything to stop her. Like she was the only one making things happen. Like she'd get fouled setting a screen or fouled going for an offensive rebound or something like that. Just wasn't enough.
Something that it was the fourth quarter. So gotta
be honest, I did not watch much of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, but I think the reason why Stewie scored as much as she did, which is crazy because 19 is nothing for the league's leading scorer, but
below average.
She just has every shot in her arsenal. It was a Breon January side pick and roll that they iced, but she was able to get it into Stewie and, Stewie's length and high hands. And she's able to finish over, I want to say like Billings and Cheyenne Parker in traffic. And, were it not for her, it would have looked much worse, which is crazy.
Yeah, it would have looked more like Aces Lynx, I guess, instead of a 14-point game. Got to bring things full circle. We started talking about Minnesota, right?
We did. Actually, we talked about things being messy, and this game was that. So, rooting for Team Stewart, obviously. Because
watching Asia Wilson do well is also well within the confines of this podcast. So we're good.
Yeah,
Asia Wilson, Candace Parker, Courtney Vandersloot, like, and all step through favorites. So
That's true. Let me pressure you on an over/under for step throughs in the All-Star game?
I don't think there's going to be like significant defense to force people into step throughs, right? So 1.5.
Okay. Now, if DeWanna Bonner was in the All-Star game,
13.
okay, just checking. Are you looking forward to any games right after All-Star?
That's a good question. I haven't really looked at the schedule that far ahead, but hey, let me pull it up. Right after All-Star, we have Aces Liberty, which is also happening today after we record. Dream Sky. That's what I'm looking forward to.
And if Dream Sky turns out to be good, that'll be our game of the week. So yeah. Unless you have anything else, do you have anything to plug? I know the most recent episode of
The Whip Around. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I meant your guest.
Oh, my guest.
Because it was an Aces one.
Yeah. So I recorded my newest podcast on Swish Appeal with Sam Gordon, who covers the Aces in Las Vegas. And that was a lot of fun. And he reminded me of the fact that the Aces are deprived of draft capital moving forward, which was very interesting to me. But yeah.
Link below. And then, enjoy the All-Star game. We'll catch you on the other side of All-Star. Bye.